So once you've prepped all your pattern pieces with all your seam allowances, you've tacked the 3 layers together, you've tacked out all your seam allowances, everything's ready, you're going to assemble it. So if you take a look at your paper pattern, your side seams, you have these balance marks, so you want to attach your jigger and your stomacher to the back panel. So you're going to do this all at the same time. So looking at your actual pieces, this has been completely prepped, finished off, your bone in, your eyelets in it, and you're gonna, at those balance marks that were on your pattern, pin them all together. So you're gonna have these 2 together and this and the back panel, and you're gonna come along and machine them together. Press them open and finish your seam allowance however you want to finish it. I've overlocked it here. You could bias bind it on this one here. I bias bound it. Looks quite nice, the bias binding. So however you want to finish that, and just make sure that this panel is short enough and doesn't get hindered by when you turn your top and bottom edges down. So make sure it's free. So once you've done that, you turn it over, and we want to start adding the decoration. So in your pack you have some 1-inch millinery Petersham, and the reason we're using millinery because it's got a little bumpy edge and it can be ironed, a curve into it. So can you see here the top edge of the neckline here is curved, and we want to mimic that. We don't want to just put this straight across, so if I press it with an iron I can put a curve into this one. So with the decoration, first I want to roughly map out where I want it to go. So I want it to come up along this seam here, but I just want it to slightly go over it so it disguises it, so this looks like it's all one piece. And then I'm going to come along here, and I know I'm going to put a curve in it, and then just slightly in front of my center front line. So I'm coming up, across and down, and I'm going to leave it longer so it goes in right up to the end of the panels. So when we come to turn this, it will get turned under. So you need to miter these corners. So I've fiddled with it till I got a nice miter, and I pressed the miter in. And if I press it now, I'm going to take my iron now, and if you just make sure it's not too hot, you don't want to scorch it, and if I just pull it round like this as I press, so I can get a nice little curve, slight curve in it, and then I chuck it on the body. And I'm going to keep playing with that till I'm happy with my curve. Need another little tweak there, because you can see as I'm pressing it that's rippling, so it's a little bit bigger. So what you're doing is when you're pressing it, you're shrinking it. you're curving it and you're shrinking that out at the same time. So just do it till you're happy with your result. Yeah, just maybe another little tweak of that. So just play with it till you get a nice shape. So once you've ironed your curve in and everything, and you've laid it where you want it to be, so on this side, just covering that seam, leave yourself a little bit of a lip along the top so you can see the color, and same along the center front. So about 5-6 millimeters. And then you need to prick stitch. So I've prick stitched all along this edge here with a black thread, so you can't see it and you don't see anything. And what I've done is prick stitch just into the surface, so it's not coming through to the back. You can't see it anywhere in the back. So how you prick stitch: use a fine hand needle and use a colored thread so you can see what I'm doing. And you just literally tiniest back stitch and go along underneath, just in the surface of your fabrics. I don't want to pull it tight because I want to take it out, and just keep doing that and lay it all down. And if it's in the same color, you won't even notice that. Don't stitch this down, so I'm literally going to catch it there and catch it at the point and there, because if you start trying to stitch that down, it makes it look a bit sloppy, so I wouldn't bother there. So long and then on the inside. Your next step is to finish the top and bottom off. So if you get yourself some bias binding, it's a good idea to pre-iron everything to where you want the hems to be, so you've got an idea of where to attach the bias binding. So we're just looking at this bottom at the moment, and then I get my bias binding and open it up, and you're gonna just, this is why you need to pre-iron, so you can see how thick your fabric is when you turn it, how far you need to go down, attach your bias binding from that edge. So if you leave it roughly about there, and it's a good idea to pre-iron your edge in so it's finished already. And I'm going to put it to the edge and pin it in place. So I'm going to pin it all the way along. So like that. Then I can come and machine it all along there, and then I would turn it down, Turn it over, trim this away. Clip it where it needs to be clipped. So on anywhere where there's a slight curve, clip it. And then turn it in and slip stitch it down. So here it is after it's been bias bound. So you can see there's about a 5mm lip there, and that's bias bound. It's missing the bottom edge, so that can flip back and forth, and I've come along here. So now you need to do the top edge as well. So the top edge, if you bias bind the neckline first on the shoulder strap, and then on this side bias bind the shoulder strap first, carry on around, and then just stop here, put your bias binding out of the way, attach your strap, and then turn it back down, and then you can carry on putting your bias binding along the top edge. Yeah, and then you just come along and slip stitch it all. And then it should look like that. So it's attached there. So then you should have your complete half a bodice with your little jigger. And then we'll start decorating it. That's the next session. When you're attaching your fastening, so on this Tudor bodice, the opening, it stays open till about here. So I'm putting a pin there, and put a pin in the bottom. I've roughly found the middle of that, and then again I'll find the two middles between them two and these two. I'm just doing it by eye. And if I'm happy with that gap, fine. If I'm not, again, divide each gap in half. So those pins will be the position of my fastening. So this is the right side, so I'm going to put the hooks on. So I put the hooks just slightly back, about 3 of the edge of the center front. So stitch them all on. On the other side with the loop, say I had the other side, I would just bring the loop just slightly out so it can, so this one's set back slightly. And the loop just peeps over the edge. If you had heavier fabrics and you're using these bigger military hooks, sometimes they will, I don't have the other side of these ones, so they will alternate them. So they'll do hook, loop, yeah, hook, loop, and that way when they move and that, sometimes the hooks will come undone if they're all on one side. So if you alternate them, that won't happen. So it tends to happen more with these bigger military hooks because they're a looser, it's looser, the hook, than these smaller ones.